Yeah. Okay. Well, here today with Alistair.
Hello.
Hiya. Thanks for coming in. Alistair's he's a friend of mine, but more importantly for today, he's a financial advisor who's coming in to give us a bit of, well, sort of upgrade our knowledge on what we think.
You're going to feel financially enlightened by the end of this, hopefully.
That'll be it. I'll know everything. I'll be after your job.
Yeah. Am I getting paid for this?
No. That's all.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on.
So,
I was saying to the boys before, I've done like a very brief interview, but this is my pod debut, so thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Thanks for the invite. I know you were saying before about how did I get into this, or like how did I end up being a financial advisor. I think I never expected to be in this position.
I don't suppose you grew up, did you, thinking, when I get older I want to be a financial advisor?
I don't think anybody does. I don't think anybody does, to be honest. It's probably one of these jobs that you probably just either see an opportunity for, or you get, you just sort of fall into it, which was, I was very much in that category. I think from what is it like as a career and a job, I think you don't have to be the best at maths, because you don't have to be Rain Man and know everything.
Just got to have a good calculator.
You've got to have a really good solar charged calculator, as long as that's charged up, or your phone. You can the maths sort of is one element to it, but I think just being able to sit and talk to people, because I think financial advice, I don't think it'll ever go to this robo advice that they're talking about, where you're chatting to AI and it's telling you what to do with your pension, because no matter how good it is, there's probably always an element of, I still want to talk to somebody face to face and have a brew and tell them about what I'm worried about and things like that.
Well, when you're giving up your money to somebody, you want to know who it is, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there used to be 250,000 financial advisors in the UK pre you having to have any sort of formal qualification, and then as soon as they brought in a regulation to say that every advisor has got to be qualified to a minimum standards, I think they went from 250,000 advisors to about 20,000 in the space of a year or two, because a lot of advisors can't be bothered doing.
You don't want an advisor who says to you the 10 to 1 at Newmarket's a good bet.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's a massive lack of financial advisors being able to replace the amount of older financial advisors that are retiring. Because when you probably think of a financial advisor, immediately you might think of someone, older, sort of pinstripe suit and tie, very formal.
I was disappointed when you come in today and there's no pinstripe suit.
You said it was dressed down Tuesday. The landscape of financial advice and pensions, which we're going to come on to, is all that's changed so much in the last 20, 30 years. It used to be very straightforward. You work in a company, you get a final salary pension, you retire at 60, you get that for as long as you live. There's nothing really complex about it. It's so much different nowadays, where people have 4, 5, 6 jobs before they're even 35, and they've got all these little bits of pots of pensions everywhere, and they don't know what to do with it. They've lost the paperwork. Those sorts of things are the new problems that people are facing when they're trying to manage their retirement planning and the pensions and stuff like that. I think there's like £4 billion of unclaimed pension pot money.
That doesn't surprise me. That
no.
I've got to admit, I'm one of them people.
Really?
I get a statement comes through every so often from a different company, and I go, oh, didn't realise I had a pension with them. And it's like, there won't be a massive amount. It'll only be, because it'll be when I was somewhere for a short period of time or something, and there'll be maybe 3 or 5 grand in it. But I keep thinking to myself, I need to sort of bring all them together at some stage. And I guess these are the sort of things that you're here to tell us as well, that you can do all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think mainly just knowing where your stuff is. Like, I say to clients, if you had 20, 30 grand sat in a bank account you've forgotten about, chances are you probably wouldn't have forgotten about it. You'd know exactly where it was. You'd probably know what interest rate you're getting on it. you know who it was with, all the rest of it. But with a pension pot, people seem to think, oh, it's just something over there that is just, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's doing. I just know I can't have it till later.
Yeah, I think because it's so far in the future, like people sort of just don't think about it, do they? Because they think, I mean, especially when you're a lot younger and you're thinking it's 30 years before I can even touch that. So I'm not that bothered about it at this moment in time.
Yeah, I suppose just understanding, okay, how much have I got? How many pensions have I got? What does that give me as a sort of total pot? And then sort of looking at, you know, is it the right thing to do to consolidate? Do I have any really good benefits with these pensions that I'd forgotten about or wasn't aware of? And I think just getting people to understand and engage with that process rather than just going, it's a pot of money, it's over there. I'll just keep getting these letters from random companies. I don't know what it's invested in. I don't know how much I'm getting charged for it. You know, I'm not getting any advice on it. I think just having that, understanding that idea that it is your money, it's your money with your name on it, and treat it just as importantly as money that you've got sat in, you know, a cash account or a deposit account. I think that's really important.
Yeah. When you say about consolidating it as well, is the charges associated with that generally? Because like I said, if I've got one, say it's only 3 or 5 grand, if I want to move that over to a different pension pot, would there be some fee for doing that? And is there a stage at where it's probably not worth your while? You may as well just let it run its course and cash it in when you get to retirement.
Most of these pension providers that you might have 2 or 3 small pots with, generally they are set up by the employer because they're cheap and they're sort of almost a tick box for the employer. So if you've got lots of, you know, small pots knocking about, the chances are, again, I'll caveat this with, each one is totally different, and you'd need to check whether it's good, bad, indifferent, or whatever before you do anything. But most of these small pots, it wouldn't cost you anything to consolidate them. Generally, would be, if your employer scheme offers, it's generally a good idea to have all of your money in one pot, working with one investment strategy, rather than having 4, 5, 6 pots of money all doing things very slightly differently with no contributions going in every month. You're better off having it all in one, having one clear defined investment strategy, as to whether you sort of, you know, to keep it simple, low, medium, or high risk, you know, underlying investment.
And you can spread it across them, can't you? You don't have to put it all in low or all in high. You can do a percentage of your pension goes into each, can't you?
You can, and I suppose that's where the value of getting advice is. And I'm definitely not sort of saying this, oh, everyone come and speak to me about your pension, but the important thing to know is stocks and shares outperform any other asset class 99% of the time over any time period. So that gives you the confidence that putting all your money into stocks and shares funds, you know, if you've got longer than 10 years until you're going to access the fund, access your money, you know, it's helping people understand that and not to be fearful of it, and actually that will give you better returns and better, you know, better growth on your pension pots.
Yeah, kind of leads us on to then about what you put into a pension and when you should put it in. I mean, I know I was always told you put in as much as you can as early as you can, but I know you were telling me just before we sort of sat down about some statistics. I won't put you on the spot and ask you to remember them figures off the top of your head unless you can.
Well, now you mention it, now you've teed that up nicely. I'll try and remember. So going back to, you know, why you should start earlier is purely down to how compounding returns work, and what it shows is that money that's been invested over a long period of time, quite simply, will have better growth than you know, even a higher amount of money being put in, but only a very short space of time of investment. So trying to do my best to remember the figures that you said. To achieve, I think it was to achieve £300,000 in your pension pot at age 65, to achieve that based on, I think it was 5.5-6% average returns each year. Someone who's 25 would have to put in 250 quid a month, roughly. to get them to that if they did that every year till 65. Someone who's 35, so you got that 10-year delay of basically not doing anything or thinking, oh, I'll sort that out later, or oh, it's my retirement, it's ages away yet. Someone starting that journey at 35 would need to put over £550 a month in. So what you're doing is basically saying, right, that's not Matt's problem today, that's Matt's problem later on. When you might have, you know, a young family at 35, you might want to be starting a business, you might want to be doing all these things that are going to cost money, you know, doing home improvements, that sort of thing. You're then asking yourself later to basically double what you need to put in just because you've decided not to start earlier, which I know is really important because especially, I mean, I hate talking about the cost of living crisis, but they call it a crisis. The cost of living, as everybody knows, has gone up significantly. So I don't doubt for 1 second that people need or feel like they need every penny that's getting paid to them in their paycheck. But by deciding to opt out of company pension schemes is hugely detrimental to your financial well-being, because by opting out and sort of saying that's Matt Maguire's problem in 10 years' time, I don't need to worry about that now, I'm living for the here and now, that's all well and good. But by opting out sooner, you're basically causing yourself a larger problem later down the line, even 5 and 10 years' time. The other element to it is if you're opting out of a company pension scheme, you're basically saying, I don't want free money. That is pretty much exactly what you're saying, because by opting out of a company pension scheme, I mean, the minimum employer contributions as it stands today for an employee is 3%, which will end up going up over time. You're basically saying, do you know what? I don't want your 3%. And 3%, if you've got a career of 10 years, you know, under your belt so far, and you've opted out through that time period, you've lost out 3% every year, plus the growth that investment would have made over that 10-year period. So you're losing out twice, really. I mean, who doesn't want free money? Like, you're basically saying to your employer, like, do you know what? You can hire me because I'm cheap, because I'm not going to take your free money off you. And employers are thinking, why you know, that's fine, but you're only hurting yourself. If you actually break down what that contribution is that you're missing out on, a lot of the time it's negligible.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is as well is what the employee contributes as well comes out of their salary before tax as well. So when they're contributing 5%, it doesn't feel like 5% in their actual take home, does it? Because it's before tax. It probably, I try and tell them it probably would feel more like 3% to them. And because then if they put 5 in, we match 5. So there's 10% potentially going in their pension for the cost of them of 3%.
Yeah.
But if then they opt out, they've lost, like what you're saying, that's 7% plus the growth on it.
Yeah, I think, well, the fact that you're actually putting in more than the minimum is great, because I'll tell you now, the amount of clients or people that we speak to that their employer is paying the bare minimum, you know, the fact that you're paying in more for your employees is great. Like, you honestly, you don't get that everywhere. Even in some of these good clients that work in big companies that are like, nah, we might give you an extra percent because you've asked for it, not just this is the standard. You want to help yourself, we're going to help you as well. That's great. And like you said, you're losing out on, like, honestly, when you look at what that could amount to over a 25, 30-year working career at a place, you know, it's huge. Like, it makes a difference between having a really crap retirement and having a decent retirement where you can afford, you're not watching, can we afford to go out for a meal? Can we afford this holiday and things like that? You don't want that.
Well, I think what's sad is when you see some people retire, and because they retired, they've got to change the lifestyle because they can't afford to go on holidays anymore and they can't afford things like that. But what you need to do, like what you say now, is plan early for that stage of your life and know that you're going to have the same standard of living.
I think that,
or possibly even better.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, because we live in this sort of here and now sort of society where we were talking before about when you go on Amazon or any other website, the first thing you do is filter for how quick can I get it, not how much it costs. So I think that people wanting immediacy, they rather have something now than more later on, just shows you that sort of way that a lot of society thinks nowadays. And I think looking at, even if you're in your 20s and you think, do you know what, I'm really not interested. I know, Al, what you're saying is gospel and you're great and everything and you know everything and I'm listening to you, but I'm still not interested. I think even if you said, look, I'm just going to save the bare minimum for now and I'm just going to keep saving, I'm going to take my employee contributions and just get into the habit of, that's what it is. It's just another tax, if you like. You're taxing yourself for later. Even if you do that without actually considering what your retirement's going to look like. I'm 35 and I look 40, but I'm 35. But even me thinking now if I'm 25 years away from retirement, I've no idea what that's going to look like. I don't know what I'm going to want or need when I'm 60 or, how much the cost of living is going to be at that point. All I can do at this stage is be putting away a reasonable level of contributions, knowing that that's building up. And then when I get to later, when I get into my 40s or early 50s, and you start to, you become more aware of, actually, I'm now closer to the end of my career than I was to the start of my career. Running through those numbers becomes much more important, and actually understanding what that's going to give you when you get to retirement age. I think that's really, really important, for people. Like Australia, great example of this, because Australia started doing an auto enrollment, I think it was maybe 10 years before the UK. And now when we look at the average pension pot of a UK working individual versus an Australian citizen, the difference, I think the average UK pension pot is about 40 grand, which is peanuts. In retirement, that would give you about £1,600 a year, which is nothing. No. Okay. The average Australia pension pot, just because they started this process 10 years earlier, is over 100,000. So I think just looking at that as a comparator, we should be aiming to be doing what they're doing, and their minimum contributions over there is 11%, soon to be going to 12%. So the fact that you are giving, or your employees are putting 10% in, means that you're sort of ahead of the game in that respect. So yeah, well done, Matt.
I'll take that. Yeah.
If you go back even 30, 40 years, probably 30 years, your average life expectancy might be early 70s, right? It's now, I think, average life expectancy for a man is 81 years. So if you're starting paying state pension out at 67, 68, that's 10, maybe 15 years that you're paying that out. Back in the day, when people started getting their old age pension at 60, and they're only living till 68, 69, because of the working conditions, developments in like health and social, developments in medicine, that wasn't as much of a burden on the government and on the taxpayer. Whereas now there's more people living longer in retirement, so that money's got to come from somewhere, whether we like it or not. That's why the government and the government is wanting people to take more ownership of their retirement. If you don't want to retire at 68, 69, 70 for when the state pension clicks in for us younger folk, if you don't want that, if you don't want to work till you're 70, you've got to start putting some money aside now, so you can retire earlier when the state decides that you can retire.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's what you're waiting for. You're waiting for the state to tell you when you can retire.
So your private pension at the minute, you can take at 55, can't you?
Yeah.
Will that go up as well, do you think?
So that age tracks behind a few elements of this. So first of all, it's average life expectancy for a man and a woman. Be no surprise to you that women live longer than men.
I'm not going to say anything.
It's average. It starts from average life expectancy. Okay, that then gives the steer on what the government sets as to when you can access your state pension. because obviously there's a limit to how much they can afford to be paying out through that course of averageness. And then working back from that again is when you can access your private pensions. At the moment, it's 55. In 2020, I'm going to say 2028, might be wrong, 2026 or 2028, one of those two, it's moving to 57 before you can access it. In another 10 years, that might be 58, 59, and again, it's all down to how long we're living for. They don't want people to access the pension pots too early, because if they deplete the pension pots too early and they live till the 90, 100, the problem there is that they're going to become solely reliant back on the welfare, and back on the government, back on taxpayers again when they get into that latter stage of retirement. They want people to take ownership of their retirement by saving into their own pension pots, having more control. It gives you more control, doesn't it? You're not waiting to be dictated to when you can retire. You're taking that ownership yourself and saying, this is when I want to retire because I've made a plan and I've made sufficient provisions to give me a decent retirement that I want.
Yeah. And the other thing as well, if you've got your own private pension, you've got options with, haven't you? When you get to retirement age, you can take, is it 25% of it tax-free in a lump sum? So if there's something you've always wanted, it, like, don't know whether it's a fancy car,
boat,
a cruise around the world or whatever it is, you can take that lump sum tax-free.
Yeah,
and use that.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, so as it stands, you get 25% tax-free cash up to a certain limit. They used to have a lifetime allowance how much you can save into your pension, which has been scrapped, but won't go into the details of that. But yeah, you get 25% of your overall pot you could take as tax-free cash. Yeah. Okay. Again, giving you that luxury of, all right, we're going to do a nice thing, or we're going to do this and that, or I'm going to use that money to help my kids get on the property ladder, or I'm going to use it for whatever that you want to use it for. But then you think, all right, well, that's great. That's 25%. What about the other 75%? The other 75% is taxable at your marginal rate.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is everybody in the UK at the moment can earn £12,570 without paying tax. Anything above that, between that and 50,000, is taxed at 20%. So if you say you wanted, 15 grand a year out of your pension, out of your private pension, because that's what it can afford to sustain, you've got 12,500 already tax free. So you're actually only paying tax on 2,500 of it.
Yeah. Do you pay any NI on pension?
No.
Right.
No NI on pension, but to help clients understand the taxation of their pension, we just say look at it like PAYE minus obviously paying the national insurance contributions on it, because that's how it's taxed. When we're paying clients out their monthly or annual income payments, it's taxed at source by HMRC. They've got the control over that, but there's still ways in which you can be cute with it. Like, if you didn't need to take your 25% tax-free cash, you could say, all right, well, I'm going to take my 12,500 of tax-free income, or taxed at 0%. I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to take another £7,500 of tax-free cash every year. So you're actually giving yourself 20 grand a year of totally, tax-free income.
Yeah.
Which again is great.
So what you're saying is that 25%, if you don't take it all in the first year, you can spread it over multiple years.
Yeah, you don't have to take it in the first
year. So you
could
take 5% for 5 years or something like that if you wanted.
Yeah, that's right. Like, we don't have many clients that we always ask the question, should I take my 25% tax-free cash? We say, what do you need it for? And they say, well, nothing. I say, well, why would you want to just have that sat in the bank earning, a couple of percent in a savings account, or leave that money invested? It's still growing throughout your retirement, and all you're doing is just taking chunks of tax-free cash as and when you need it, whether that's for, your annual holiday, whether that's, to give you that, regular income that you need. There's all sorts of things that you can do with it, to be cute with it and minimize your tax when it's coming out the other side.
Yeah, that's all good. And what about people who say, well, rather than put money into a pension, I'd rather put it into property and invest it myself in property or something? Because everyone always goes, one thing that never goes down is property. as long as you keep your money in property, it will always go up. And if you could buy somewhere, and whether you did it on like one of these landlord mortgages, you get somebody in who's paying rent in it, they're paying the mortgage whilst you're still earning, and you're not taking anything out yourself. When you get to retirement age, you could have a property that's mortgage free, and that rent that you then get in becomes your pension, for example.
Yeah, we get asked this all the time as well. Is property a good investment? I've got absolutely no issue with people that have got that sort of passion for property. That is, they either see it as a side career, or they do it as a part-time thing, or they do it alongside a full-time job and thing. What you need to think about, I suppose, is before you decide that property is the one for you, that you're going to use that strategy as a retirement plan, make sure that you've worked out the tax situation on that, because it's all great saying, well, that's going to give me £1,000 a month. Yeah, but what have you already spent? How much is the interest? What's the capital gains tax? What's the income tax on it? So I think it's making sure you understand all that, which, if you go and speak to an accountant, they will be able to give you that.
Yeah.
Give you a breakdown of that. Obviously you have to pay, but it'll give you a breakdown of whether that's a good plan or not.
That's all interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
you're gonna go right move in a minute, aren't you?
No, that was good. Yeah. It's good to know. I think I've learned a few things today.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. I feel like I've taught loads, and hopefully.
Well, that's the idea of these.
Yeah.
I just sit here, ask the odd question, then just sit and listen. Yeah. Don't have to do too much.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I just thought funny when you said earlier, you said about when you were growing up, you didn't think, I want to be a financial advisor or anything. As you were saying, it just reminded me of Jamie Carragher talking to Gary Neville, and he said, growing up, he says, nobody ever says, I want to be a fullback when they go on about being a footballer.
It's normally a fullback or a goalkeeper, isn't it? But yeah, I suppose going back to that, nobody tells us about money really when you're going through high school, college, university. Nobody tells you about what is a mortgage, like how does a mortgage work, what is what does APR mean on a credit card, what happens if you take an interest-free overdraft out from the bank while you're studying, what happens if you can't repay it, how does credit work, how do investments work, how do pensions work. Like nobody teaches us this stuff, and it's and I don't think
that should be a subject at school. Then do you think there should be something that teaches
absolutely
everybody about that?
I mean, I would have
benefited.
I think every single person would have benefited if you'd have had to do some sort of, even if it's basic financial education, just knowing how credit works.
Yeah, I remember when our kids were at school, and we should have probably took a leaf out of his book, but the headmaster at the school, at the primary school, he was telling us what he does with his own kids is every month he gives them £100 each, but then he makes them out of that paying rent back, contribute to bills, and he tells them what they have to contribute each month and that, to get them used to sort of dealing with money and where your money goes and everything. And at the time, I remember him telling us, and we were like, wow, that's a great idea. And then went home and did nothing about it ourselves. It was like...
Well, that's the thing, like, we speak to parents and grandparents that know nothing about pensions. They come to us with all this paperwork and say, I've got all this, no idea what to do with it or what I'm doing with it. So how are we expecting people that are parents and grandparents to be able to relay knowledge down to children and grandchildren that they don't have? And it's ours. No one's going to do it for us. It's our responsibility to get clued up and go and get advice or go and learn. There's even just going on YouTube, like you put in how does compound interest work, or how do pensions work, or what is a SIP?
Is that like one of the? Is it in the top 10 of search things on YouTube?
It's unlikely, but it's all there. Like there's loads of like great videos and like calculators and things that you can use. If you and if you're not ready to sort of go and get some financial advice, there's loads of stuff that you can get clued up on that. But yeah, I think financial education is a big thing, and just trying to help people understand what they do now has a huge impact on what they might get at retirement or what they might have in 10, 20, 30 years, just from compound interest or compound growth. It's massive. So yeah, I hope that's been useful.
No, that's been great, that. Yeah, cheers for that, Andy.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.